All right, strap yourselves in for this deep dive we're heading straight into. Well, the belly of the beast, the Russian Mafia. And trust me, this isn't some Hollywood gangster flick. This is the real deal, and let me tell you, you've sent us enough material to make my head spin.
Get ready for a wild ride. It's a world as complex as it is fascinating. And we're going way beyond the usual stereotypes, you know, the tracksuits and vodka, to give you the real story behind this criminal network.
That's what we live for, right? Diving headfirst into these rabbit holes, separating the truth from the tall tales. So where do we even begin with something this big? It's not like the Russian Mafia just popped up overnight.
Absolutely not. Their roots actually go pretty far back. Think Tsarist Russia, those early gangs robbing travelers, that kind of thing. But things really get interesting and much more relevant to the modern mafia when we hit the Soviet era. Think Stalin, those brutal forced labor camps, the whole grim reality of that regime.
Okay, hold up a sec. Are you saying those gulags, they weren't just brutal prisons, they were like a training ground for organized crime?
Dark, but true. Picture it. You're stuck in the most brutal, unforgiving environment imaginable. And within that pressure cooker, a very particular criminal subculture started to bubble up. These were the vori vizakoni, the thieves in law. And let me tell you, these guys weren't your average thugs. They lived by a strict code, had their own hierarchy, even a whole language to throw the authorities off. It was like a whole other society operating right under the noses of the guards.
So you got Stalin over there trying to micromanage every little thing, and then boom, this criminal underworld pops up right under his nose, operating like a well-oiled machine.
I gotta give them points for resourcefulness.
Resilience is more like it. And it gets even more fascinating. Imagine this, if the authorities controlled every aspect of life in the gulags. Food, clothing, the works. So how did the Vori communicate? How they show their rank, their history, their, shall we say, credentials in that kind of environment?
Don't tell me. Secret handshakes in the mess hall. Seems like prison would be one big networking event for these guys. Close, but they use tattoos. And I'm not talking about some blurry anchor or a heart with mom on it. These were intricate designs, with each symbol painstakingly placed, telling a story that only other Vori could read. It's been said that, in the gulags, around 70% of all prisoners were tattooed. And for a whole lot of them, those tattoos were way more than just decoration. They were a testament to the wearer's experiences, the crimes they committed, even their position within the Vori hierarchy.
It's like a criminal resume, but permanently etched onto your skin. I've heard of prison tattoos before, but I never realized they were that complex.
It's all about survival. Knowledge equals power in that kind of world, and those who could decipher those tattoos had a serious edge. And here's the kicker, even if you did get out, those markings stayed with you, a constant reminder of your past. And that brings us to a turning point for the Vori World War II. World War II. Talk about a shakeup. Suddenly, Stalin needs every warm body he can get to fight off the Nazis, even offering prisoners their freedom if they enlist. Sounds like a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, I mean, who wouldn't trade a gulag for a battlefield? Okay, bad choice of words, but you get what I'm saying.
Except for the Vori, it wasn't so simple. Remember that strict code, never, and I mean never, side with the authorities, fighting for Stalin. It was practically sacrilege.
So talk about a rock in a hard place. What did they do?
Well, lots of them did end up fighting, figured it was a chance to exploit the chaos, maybe come out on top when the dust settled. But for those who stayed behind, let's just say they weren't too happy with those who chose to fight. They even had a name for them, Suki, which basically translates to, well, you get the idea. It was a huge insult, the ultimate betrayal.
So not only are you dodging bullets on the front lines, you've got this whole other war brewing back home. I'm sensing a theme here. The Voris do not mess around.
Not even a little bit. And get this, the authorities pretty much let it happen. They figured, hey, less work for us, thin out the herd a bit. But here's the thing. It also created a new breed of criminals, hardened by years of war, both inside and outside the prison walls. These were the guys who'd go on to dominate the Russian underworld, the ones who were ready to seize the moment when the Soviet Union finally crumbled in '91.
And then it was off to the races. Talk about an opportunity. A superpower implodes overnight. You've got chaos everywhere, no real law to speak of. Sounds like a recipe for, well, organized crime to step right in and take over.
It was a gold rush.
Right.
Suddenly you've got ex-KGB, former soldiers, anyone with a knack for for violence and a nose for money, all flocking to the only game in town. And these weren't your average street toughs. We're talking about guys who'd spent years, decades even, sharpening their skills in the gulags. They knew how to operate in the shadows, they knew how to sniff out weakness, and most importantly, they knew how to survive.
Okay, so we've got the players, we've got the motivation, we've got the perfect storm of opportunity. But how do they go from running prison yards to running entire industries? That's a pretty big jump.
Think about it. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it wasn't just a political upheaval, it was economic free-for-all. State-owned assets, industries, natural resources, all suddenly up for grabs. And this privatization process, well, let's just say it was more like a chaotic land grab.
So it's the Wild West, everyone for themselves, and you need someone who can operate in that kind of environment.
Bingo. And who better than the Vori? They understood power, they knew how to make and enforce deals, how to make sure those deals were non-negotiable, and they were utterly ruthless. They were perfectly positioned to fill the power vacuum left by the Soviets. But it wasn't just about brute force. These guys were strategic, organized, and that code of conduct we talked about. As brutal as it was, it gave their operations a framework.
So they're organized, they're connected, and they're absolutely terrifying. What chance did the average Russian citizen have in this new world? Was there any way to avoid getting mixed up with these guys?
For a lot of people, it didn't feel like there was any other choice. This was the era of krysha. Literally, it means roof.
Oh, I'm not sure I follow.
Imagine you're trying to run a business, any business, in this chaotic new landscape. The police are corrupt, the courts are useless, and suddenly you've got these groups offering you protection. You pay them, and they make sure nobody messes with you. Of course, protection is just a nice way of putting it, right?
It's like a twisted insurance scheme where you're paying criminals to protect you from other criminals, or from themselves, for that matter.
Welcome to Russia in the 1990s. And the Vori, with their connections, their reputation, and their, shall we say, persuasive methods, they were the ones selling all the krysha. And this wasn't just some back alley dealing either. This was happening at every level. Businesses, banks, even government officials. Everyone was either paying for protection, looking for it, or figuring out how to exploit it.
So while the rest of the world is celebrating the fall of the Iron Curtain, Russia's basically turned into a giant game of Risk, with the Vori holding all the best cards.
Pretty much. And as the saying goes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So while all this is going down in Russia, we start to see their influence spreading beyond its borders. And one of the most intriguing examples is, well, you might want to sit down for this, Brighton Beach, New York.
Brighton Beach? You mean Coney Island hot dogs, those little boardwalk rides? That Brighton Beach. Wait a minute, you're telling me the Russian mob was out there rubbing elbows with tourists while they ate cotton candy?
Not exactly cotton candy. It's a wild story that actually starts way before the fall of the Soviet Union. It all begins with a wave of Russian immigrants, specifically from Jewish communities, who settled in Brighton Beach.
So we've got Brighton Beach, this tight-knit community finding its feet in a new world.
Right, and it wasn't always hostile. Often these networks were already woven in, offering help you couldn't get elsewhere.
Like navigating a new system, getting loans banks wouldn't touch.
Exactly. It might start small jobs, housing, but it builds a debt, a reliance. That's how they gain a foothold. One of the first big Russian mob operations in Brighton Beach is actually, well, it sounds funnier than it was.
Oh, hit me with it.
Picture this. The 1970s, and this group, they called themselves the Potato Bag Gang.
Potato Bag Gang. Doesn't exactly scream organized crime, does it?
Don't let the name fool ya. They were raking it in. They'd sell gas dirt cheap, like too good to be true cheap, lines around the block.
Okay, I think I see where this is going.
Instead of gas, potato bags.
Potato bags. I mean, that's kind of brilliant. Who even thinks of that?
Low risk, high reward. People were more likely to grumble than go to the cops. And the money they made funded their other, shall we say, less starchy ventures. It's classic. Really start small, exploit a need, organized crime 101.
So from potatoes to, well, I'm guessing it wasn't all small-time scams forever. When did Brighton Beach become the Russian Mafia's U.S. HQ?
Power. The more they got, the more they wanted. And the less they cared how they got it. That's when you start seeing names like Evsei Agron. He was major, ran Brighton Beach for a while. Till 85 when he was killed.
Things were heating up.
His bodyguard, Boris Biba-Nayfeld, took over, but it was constant vying for control, violence, double crosses. Nobody lasted long. Like a gangster soap opera, minus the dramatic music.
Sounds intense. But was this all just local turf wars? Or was there a bigger picture? Ties back to Russia.
Oh, they were tied in, all right. Brighton Beach became this hub. Smuggling, money laundering, you name it. And as their reach grew, so did their contacts. The Italian Mafia, Colombian cartels. Lines got blurry, stakes got higher.
Okay, so we've gone from potatoes and gas to international drug cartels. That's quite the leap. But you keep mentioning the Vori Visa Cone. Is that like one big boss calling the shots?
No, it's not that straightforward. The Russian Mafia, it's not some monolithic organization like in the movies with one guy in a smoky room. Think of it more like a network or an ecosystem even. Tons of different groups, each with their own specialty, their own turf.
So less Godfather, more like Silicon Valley. But instead of tech, it's illegal everything.
Grim, but kind of accurate. Entrepreneurial, you got to give them that. And they're quick to adapt, whatever the market demands, legal or not, they'll find a way.
Okay, so fast forward to now. Are they still a major player? Haven't exactly seen Russian Mafia trending on Twitter lately.
They've definitely gone more low-key, yeah. So, Putin's regime, while no stranger to a little creative governance themselves, they've cracked down on the more blatant stuff. But gone. Not a chance. Some say they're more ingrained than ever, hidden in plain sight. Legitimate businesses, banks, you wouldn't even know.
And with the dark web and crypto and all that, I mean, that's got to be like a playground for these guys.
Exactly. It's a brave new world, and they're evolving right along with it.
Well, on that cheery note, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive. Big thanks to you for, well, walking us through that maze. I feel like I need to go scrub my brain out after all that.
It's a pleasure, as always, was all mine.
And to everyone listening, stay curious, but maybe invest in a good security system. Yeah, just in case.